welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights. And I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel, like the video, subscribe to my channel, click the notifications bell if you want to see when I will post a new video. And also, if you're interested in a private consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. You can email me at the email I will leave in the video description, and I can send you a full pricing list and reading options. And also, more recently, I have started a tarot channel, and I will be linking that in the video description as well. And if you are interested in tarot, go ahead, check it out. Maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And also, last but not least, I have started memberships on my channel, and I will be linking a video in the video description with full details about what the membership part entails. There are 2 levels of memberships that imply getting a few extra readings that are members only per month. All right, and I will be leaving that link in the video description. If you're curious, you can go ahead and check it out. All right, so today's video is, like I said, about the synastry analysis and composite analysis. I mean, synastry is basically chart interaspects and composite chart analysis between Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. I have talked about their relationship, I think, in bits and pieces in other videos, but this is going to be basically more extensive. Now, I cannot promise that it will be 100% because, to be fair, I could probably talk nonstop for 2 days about a synastry reading. So I'm going to be looking at some key points, all right? I'm not going to be taking like every little detail. All right, that being said, I'm gonna get straight into it. I mean, okay, short introduction, but I think everyone knows about them. They were a famous Hollywood couple that started an affair. Their relationship started as an affair because Brad Pitt was married at the time with Jennifer Aniston, and Angelina Jolie got branded as a homewrecker. These are just some points that I remember from around the time I was in high school when they got together. Yeah, I'm old. But yeah, it was like very controversial. They ended up having a lot of kids together. They were together for, I think, over a decade or around a decade. Then they got married and they got divorced after, I think, a year or 2, and citing, Brad Pitt's alcohol problems and other things, differences. All right. So that was like the short introduction. Now let me get straight into the synastry analysis. So I'm going to start with chart overlays, basically. So I'm going to go to the composite afterwards. So I'm going to look at the screen. I have used Astro.com because they are very comfortable in using chart overlays, and their chart is very easy to read. It's universal, so it's easy to read even for people who come from, or maybe specifically for people who come from tropical astrology background. But all right, even if you don't understand all of the symbols, they are easy to find, online if you are struggling a little bit. But they are even written actually, on the chart in that table where you see all the planets and their corresponding glyphs, or symbols as they are called. All right, so first things that I see, all right, so as you can see, the planets placements of Angelina Jolie are on the outside, right? So this is an overlay of Angelina Jolie's placements, natal chart placements over Brad Pitt's horoscope. So first thing that you see is they have North Node conjunct ascendant. I have talked about this, I'm pretty sure, maybe I talked about this relationship in particular or other relationships, because the North Node conjunct ascendant is an aspect that shows up quite a lot in relationships, especially relationships that seem, very fated, very whirlwind, because Rahu shows where you are going in this lifetime. So when someone's planets, or especially someone's ascendant, is conjunct your Rahu, this person makes you feel like they could bring you to, your your lessons that you have to learn in this lifetime faster. So I'm pretty sure that there was some of that happening here in their relationship, because you have Rahu falling in his ascendant, meaning Angelina Jolie's Rahu is falling in his ascendant. So already this shows that this is a very fated relationship, if you want, in the sense that they probably felt, very drawn to one another. And she particularly probably felt like he was going to be a great lesson for her, and it's going to help her develop her qualities that she needs to develop in this lifetime. I think I talked about their relationship in the Rahu, the video. I'm going to try to link all the relevant videos in the video description, but I'm pretty sure that I talked about their relationship in the Rahu dominant relationship. I did a video about the Rahu dominant relationship, and I'm going to link it in the video description if you want to learn more about it. But very briefly, I said there that if a relationship has more Rahu aspects, conjunctions, as opposed to Ketu conjunctions, it means that the relationship is really bringing the couple outside of their comfort zone. So depending on what their individual horoscopes are saying, this could be too much for some people, right? Especially if the horoscope is more Ketu dominant, which means the person has, let's say, multiple planets conjunct their Ketu. It means that they're more attached to the past, to their status quo, to their comfort zone. So when they are in a relationship with someone who brings a lot of Rahu interactions in Synastry, it could prove to be too much for them in terms of pushing them outside of their comfort zone, and, basically just keep pushing for progress in the future and all that, whereas the Ketu dominant person is just going to want to stay at home and eat chips and stuff. But basically, yeah, this is the short of it. So that's something that I noticed right off the bat. Another huge thing that you notice immediately is they have Jupiter conjunct Moon, Mars, and Jupiter. So his Jupiter is conjunct her Moon, Mars, Jupiter, multiple conjunction in Pisces. So I actually recently did a video where I talked about how Jupiter in Synastry, particularly when it's the man's Jupiter conjunct the woman's moon, can be a fertility stimulating aspect in Synastry. And they certainly have this, and when I get to the composite, you will also see that they have Moon Mars conjunct in the composite chart. So they have the two aspects that I personally consider to be the most fertility boosting aspects within Synastry, right? So chart interaspects and composite charts that you can find, and they have both of them very strongly. So it's no surprise that they ended up having biological children together. And certainly at the time, the rumor was that the reason Brad Pitt was so, threw himself headfirst into the relationship and immediately broke up with Jennifer Aniston was largely because he desperately wanted children. I mean, those were the rumors at the time. Now, who knows exactly? But like I said in that video that I did about about fertility boosting aspects, I went more in depth there. I'm going to be linking that video in the description as well. As I said in that video, these aspects really draw people in, sometimes subconsciously, with the desire to procreate, on both sides. Okay, so you have that already. So that's a strong point of attraction, and especially since it falls in his 5th house, right? His house of children. Now, 5th house is not just a house of children. First of all, he already has Jupiter in the 5th house, which shows clearly that this person has a very strong desire to have children. Jupiter is the signifier of children. One of the main signifiers. This is why Jupiter signifies the husband instead of Mars, right? Jupiter signifies the husband archetype in a woman's chart. I talked about this as well in some videos, because Jupiter is about leaving a legacy, and Jupiter wants children, wants to teach the next generation. And when you have Jupiter in the 5th house, which is the house of children, this is a particularly strong aspect that shows this person has a very strong desire to procreate, to have kids, you know. And then on top of that, she comes in with her horoscope, and her moon, Mars, and Jupiter are falling into his 5th house, stimulating that Jupiter, basically, right? So it's no surprise that he probably wanted her to have his kids from the beginning. And this is on top of, all the moon Mars aspects that they have, which I will be getting to later on. But yes, already very strong desire. And aside from that, 5th house is not just about children. In fact, having Mars in the 5th house, someone Mars in your 5th house or in your 8th house is guaranteed to increase your sexual attraction towards that person. So it's a very passion generating sort of aspect. So, I mean, guaranteed unless you are asexual or, you two are of the opposite sexual orientations. But yes, for the most part, let's say, speaking of heterosexual, regular individuals, it shows that you will have a lot of physical attraction for a person if that person has their Mars falling into your 5th house or your 8th house, and she has her Mars falling into his 5th house. So clearly he was very physically attracted to her. And on top of that, 5th house is about passion, it's about romance, so it's definitely the house of affairs, as opposed to the 7th house, which is the house of, long-term partnerships. However, so just having said that, if you look at the horoscope, you see that her Sun and her Mercury also fall in his 7th house. Now, having viewed what I just said, if her charts would have, her planets would have just stimulated, let's say, his 5th house, and she would have had no planets fall into his 7th house, it could have been that this relationship would have just been an affair. And maybe it would have lasted for a few months, and maybe they would have even conceived together, but maybe it wouldn't have turned into a marriage. Or actually, the marriage was quite brief, but before they got married, they were together for like 10 years. So it wouldn't have turned into, let's say, a long-term partnership unless you also have that 7th house connection. But when someone's planets fall into your 7th house, you definitely see this person as an ideal partner, as someone who balances you out, in terms of general characteristics and everything. And especially since she has the Sun falling in the 7th house, right? Which is one of the key planets in the horoscope. So if the Sun, the Moon, or sometimes the Ascendant fall in the other person's 7th house, that shows that the other person sees you as balancing them out. They see you as an ideal long-term partner and someone that they would want to commit to, right? So you have that. And let's see, what else? This is interesting now that I look at it. I mean, having in view how their relationship ended. So last time that I read any gossip about their divorce, I remember years after she filed for divorce, and even now, maybe they have gotten into some very long, painful custody battles. Not just custody battles, but something about alimony, like she had blamed him of not paying enough alimony for the kids and all this stuff. So there was this very bitter feud going on over finances. And now that I look at the Synastry, she has her Saturn falling in his 8th house, which is the house of joint assets, because the 8th house is the second from the 7th house. So it's basically money that you get after marriage, right? Or how your finances will change after marriage. So Saturn being a malefic, creating obstacles and frustrations, kind of explains what has happened later on. But even more so, sticking to the Saturn situation, I also talked about this, actually their relationship in particular, as well as others, in the video that I did about Saturn conjunct Rahu. in Synastry, and I said there that a lot of couples, as far as I have noticed, and still I haven't really come across anything to debunk my theory that I explained in depth in that video, that when you see Saturn conjunct Rahu in a relationship, it tends to show that there will be a lot of obstacles together, a lot of obstacles in the relationship, in front of the relationship, the longer you are together with this partner. So, and I've also mentioned that I think in that video, that I also speculated at the time when I did the video about Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper, because they were being talked about, you know, in terms of maybe they had an affair, whatever. They definitely had a lot of chemistry, and officially, they said that nothing was going on, but, you know, there were a lot of sparks flying over there. So, and I also did speculate in that video that maybe they were attracted to one another, but there were a lot of physical obstacles in their path. And aside from that, also Vivian Lee and Laurence Olivier also had this aspect, Saturn conjunct Rahu in Synastry, and a bunch of other people as well. I mean, I've seen it, you know, with synastries that I have analyzed of random non-famous people, that it tends to bring a lot of obstacles as time goes on. So basically with Saturn conjunct Rahu, it's like the sweetest spot of your relationship is at the onset of the relationship, and as time progresses, it gets more and more difficult. There are all kinds of obstacles like keep falling in your path. And I also mentioned in that video that you often see this aspect showing up where one or both people are married at the onset of the relationship, if the relationship takes off at all. You know, so basically when I say obstacles, I'm talking about obstacles that have to do with everyday reality, right? So like literally obstacles. So from the material world, things that are getting in the path of your relationship. With Vivian Lee and Laurence Olivier, it was like the more they were together, the more Vivian Lee got sick. She became more mentally unstable, and that took a massive toll on the relationship, and other things, conflicts and whatnot, eventually ended up with them splitting. Just as with Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt ended up splitting. I also mentioned in that video, I don't think it is exactly a deal breaker, because at the end of the day, it is about how much you are willing to take in order to keep a relationship going, but it certainly seems to bring a lot of, you know, conflicts, a lot of struggles together, in as a relationship progresses over time. So they have that, and on top of that, for him, it falls in the 8th house, you know, which can be joint assets, but it can also be about intimacy. It could be about physical intimacy within the marriage, within the relationship. So who knows, maybe that could have gone south as well, considering the fact that she had a double mastectomy and, you know, removed everything while she was married. I mean, I can imagine maybe some of that affected their relationship. I don't know. I'm speculating here, but that is also an aspect to look at. Then you have Venus in his 9th house, which is interesting because remember at the time, I don't know if you remember, but this was like way back when. So I was in high school and I was reading Glamour magazine and all this like nonsense, where, you know, you would see all the gossip about famous people and whatever. And I remember reading articles that said something like, you know, Angelina Jolie managed to get Brad Pitt out of his comfort zone and drag him around the world with, you know, her work with refugees and whatever. And he was much more of a comfort-loving, homebody sort of person. And she was like, you know, dragging him to all over the world. They ended up moving to France or something. They lived in France. So that's kind of explained by, you know, her Venus transiting through his 9th house, you know, because this could show that she stimulated his interest in leaving his comfort zone, traveling, because 9th house is about traveling. Also, you know, dealing with world issues, you know, things like refugee crisis and stuff like that, being more involved and all this stuff. So that makes sense, you know, with respect to their relationship. And another thing, let me see what else. aside from that, what I wanted to say is now, technically, yes, I was going to say this is not Vedic astrology, but it's also Vedic astrology, because if you look at his Mars, it's aspecting her moon. So his Mars is in Sagittarius, aspecting her moon in Pisces. And it's you know, it's a fourth aspect of Mars if you look at it from the Vedic perspective, but it's also from the tropical perspective, it's a square. And from the tropical perspective, they have mutual Moon-Mars squares. So this is why it also translates into a Moon-Mars conjunction in their composite chart. Now, this shows that there's a lot of physical attraction, a lot of physical attraction. However, there are also a lot of hurt feelings, because when you have Moon-Mars square in Synastry, it shows that basically you're annoyed by each other's vulnerable sides, because Mars is very kind of savage, you know, impatient. It's a very rough energy. It's kind of like a moon energy. It's a warrior energy. And the moon energy is kind of like the delicate, tiny little baby, you know, that it's very vulnerable, that needs a lot of love and care. And we all have that, right? So it's like our inner child or something. And it's also the inner child and also the mother archetype, right? So in any case, it's a very soft, vulnerable energy. So when you have hard aspects between the moon and the Mars person is very impatient with the moon, sees moon as kind of a crybaby, you know. And the funny thing is, for them, it's a mutual aspect. So it's like they took turns in basically, you know, tearing each other down emotionally somehow, or like being annoyed with one another. And probably they didn't actually feel safe emotionally with one another. That's probably what happened. Now, another thing is that if you look at their moon signs, I've talked about this, and again, I will try to link the relevant videos in the video description. I talked about this thing actually repeatedly, about the importance of the distance from one partner's moon to another partner's moon, particularly in heterosexual couples. So, and I said that if the distance from the woman's moon to the man's moon is shorter than the other way around, if you look at the zodiac circle, right, it's not good for heterosexual relationships, because the woman doesn't feel that supported by the partner. And actually, wait a minute. I have to check this again. Actually, wait. So from this perspective, it's good. So I initially thought that it was the other way around, but no. So her moon is in Pisces, his moon is in Sagittarius. So this is actually good for the relationship. This is actually probably why she felt drawn to him, because there is this security in the relationship. On top of which, they have something called magnetic attraction, particularly from her side to him, because Pisces moon is said to be magnetically attracted to Sagittarius moon. So magnetic attraction, again, is something that aids in maintaining a long-term attraction towards a partner and a long-term relationship, you know. But in the traditional text, they always said that it's better if the man has, you know, magnetic attraction towards the woman. And this is because, you know, having in view the biological differences between men and women, women are the ones who get more emotionally attached anyway. So that, but again, of course, take it with a grain of salt. And of course, I'm sure that if it applies to like non-heterosexual couples, you would probably not see much of a difference between, you know, it would probably be just as strong regardless, what I'm trying to say. But yes, so they do have, however, the magnetic attraction, which I'm sure added to why she was very drawn to him. I remember, again, back in the day of reading gossip magazines and whatever, that she wrote at some point, she said something like she didn't want to have her own children until she met Brad Pitt, because, which makes sense considering the aspects that they have in Synastry, like I said, with the Jupiter and the Mars. the Jupiter moon and the Mars moon context that they have in Synastry and Composite charts. And it also, I'm sure that what counted was also the magnetic attraction that she felt towards his moon, and also the fact that the distance from his moon to her moon is shorter than the distance from her moon to his moon. Because if you look at, like I said, the chart, his moon is in Sagittarius, her moon is in Pisces. So that means that she feels nurtured, understood, accepted, supported in that relationship. I said in the video that I did about distance from moon to moon, that if the distance is higher than 6 signs or 180 degrees of arc, then it really starts to become a problem, because the woman no longer feels emotionally understood, supported as much, right? And rather starts to feel almost like like the woman is kind of mothering the man to some extent. But of course, you have to look at, as usual, all of the different configurations and things that might be happening in a horoscope. All right, so looking at this, okay, a little bit, looking at it from the different perspective, which is his planets falling on her horoscope. And let's see what we have here. First of all, you see that the ascendant Rahu conjunction falls in the 5th house. So her 5th house is also stimulated. Her having Rahu in the 5th house as well shows clearly that she was very drawn to having children. However, Rahu puts an unconventional spin on everything that it touches. So it makes sense why she started adopting already when she was single. And she already had, I think, 2 adopted children, or 3, by the time that she married Brad Pitt. I don't remember exactly that she met Brad Pitt. I'm sorry. So, but Rahu, just like Jupiter in the 5th house, is an aspect that shows a person who wants to have a lot of kids, right? But Rahu just wants a more unconventional approach towards child rearing, which makes sense because, because she adopted, I mean. And but what I'm trying to say is they were compatible from this point of view, right? Just looking at this, you see, this is, I actually mentioned this in another video. This is why when you do synastry, it's really important to also look at the individual charts and see if the two people are vibing, It's not just about like synastry overlays and, aspects between planets. I mentioned this in another video, but I don't remember which one. I think the one where I talked about unrequited love or incompatibility. I did a bunch of videos where I think there was one where I talked about red flags in relationships. Maybe that's where I mentioned it. I'm not 100% sure. But in any case, the short of it is that if you have very incompatible placements in your horoscopes, like for instance, in this situation, if she had Ketu in the 5th house, and he would have had Jupiter in the 5th house, I'm almost sure that they wouldn't have gotten together. Because he was obviously desperate to have children. That's probably why he even got, interested in her. I mean, either consciously or subconsciously to begin with. But her having Ketu in the 5th house shows that she would have had no interest in having kids, or very little interest in having kids, So she wouldn't have been as enthusiastic of a participant in his interest of producing children, and also of having a whirlwind affair, because 5th house is also about fun and passion and all that stuff, right? In any case, right, I digress a little bit, but it's interesting to think about. Another thing is, you see, what's really interesting here with chart overlays is that first of all, what you see, which is positive, is that his Venus and Saturn fall in her 7th house as well. So she felt like he was balancing her out as well. So there is that potential for seeing each other as long-term potential partners. There is that is mutual from both sides. So clearly that added to why they got into a relationship. And on top of that, though, you have his Saturn conjunct her Venus, which maybe was not that great, because Saturn conjunct Venus can show that even though actually Saturn to Venus can show long-term relationships, as Saturn generally shows in relationships when you have conjunctions and oppositions especially, When you have a lot of Saturn in Synastry, it shows long-term potential commitment, because the Saturn person wants to commit to you when you have planets conjunct their Saturn or opposite their Saturn, especially. Maybe some minor aspects count as well. Minor aspects count, especially in the composite, especially when we're talking about Venus and Saturn here. So, but with the conjunction and the opposition, there is this strong desire to commit on the part of the Saturn person. So that definitely added to having a long-term relationship. And again, I did a video on the truth about Saturn in relationships. Again, I'm probably going to be linking like my entire playlist of relationship-based videos in the video description, because you can find everything there. Basically, because so having Saturn in relationships can lock people into long-term relationships, because they get not necessarily because the relationship is great, but because Saturn wants commitment, it wants durability, so it's there for the long run, and it keeps wanting to work on things. And there are pluses and minuses to this situation, as I have talked about in depth in that video, so go check it out if you want to hear more about it, because I won't get into the whole thing right now. But suffice it to say that Saturn falling in her 7th house brought that feeling of commitment mutually, and also aspecting her Venus. And then also having Venus opposite Venus, again, is a sign of attraction and romanticism. Let's see, sign of attraction and romanticism, like I said. But what's also interesting is that there are a lot of his planets that are falling into her 6th house, which is actually a house that rather suggests enemy relationships, conflicts. So this could explain why they were basically at each other's throats almost by the end of the marriage. Because, it shows a lot of conflicts. It shows maybe even that she might, to some extent, perceive him as an enemy, which is, not something that you would want to see in... not something that you would want to see in a long-term relationship. And also here, you can see, even in the previous chart, but while I'm looking at this chart, you can see the fact that he has a lot of planets conjunct his Ketu. So he's much more of a Ketu-oriented person, so much more stuck in a comfort zone and not really open to change. So whereas this relationship, they don't really have any K2 conjunctions as far as I've seen in Synastry, like in chart overlays, right? So this relationship pushed him way outside of his comfort zone, probably way outside of what he could have handled. So that's why eventually he became more and more uncomfortable with it, and, maybe wanted something simpler and less challenging. All right. So this is what I can say with respect to overlays. Now, looking at the composite chart, first thing that stands out is the Moon-Mars conjunction, very tight Moon-Mars conjunction, and then it's also conjunct the Sun. Right now, depending on which calculators you might use, there might be slight differences. But the conjunction is there because, especially according to Vedic astrology, as long as planets are in the same sign, that counts as a conjunction. So even though you might be looking at it and thinking, well, Mars is in 1 degree, Sun is in 26 degrees, that's a big difference. Yes, but it's still a conjunction, right? It may not be as strong of a conjunction as the conjunction between the Mars and the Moon here in this horoscope, but it's still a conjunction. And this is very strong because it shows that they were very united in their energies against the world. So when you have especially Moon-Mars already in the composite chart being in conjunction shows a couple that are very protective of one another when it comes to their privacy. They create kind of a fortress, right, out where they keep their stuff hidden from the rest of the world. They protect each other and their children, obviously. Once again, Moon-Mars conjunction in the composite chart is a very strong indicator of two people who are gonna procreate together. And on top of that, they also have the sun. So they have sun conjunct moon, they have sun conjunct Mars, and all of these conjunct together. So, and in the 6th house, which can explain why together or rather he joined her in her desire to be of service and to help with refugee crisis and all this stuff. And this definitely explains how their relationship played out, but it also shows definitely there was a strong connection there. There was a strong unity there, and very strong, very, very strong emotional and physical attraction. And another thing you see, 7th house is occupied by Mercury and Jupiter. Jupiter in 7th house is a great aspect to have in composite. It shows stability, happiness, growth, and on top of which, another thing is, let's see, Mercury is also the ruler of the ascendant in the composite chart. So Jupiter being conjunct Mercury and in the 7th house would have given them a very strong sense of purpose and unity together as a couple. Which, now that I look at this, I'm like, it's interesting that, actually, yes, I can see why eventually it went sour. Because if you look at this closely, you have Rahu in Leo in the 12th house, and then you have Ketu Ketu is not drawn on the chart, but Ketu is always opposite Rahu, which means that Ketu is conjunct the Sun, Moon, and Mars. Which is interesting. Now, normally, with respect to how you read Rahu and Ketu in composite, it wouldn't be 100% the same, but the symbolism is still there. So I would be inclined to think that Ketu being conjunct the Sun and Moon and Mars actually weakened this aspect. Even though it was strong, Ketu is an energy that dissolves everything that it touches, especially over time. It basically shows that as time went on, these connections here between Sun, Moon, and Mars became weaker and weaker. Like, let's say their physical attraction for one another could have gotten weaker, their emotional involvement with each other could have gotten weaker, their ability to be understanding and caring towards one another, shown by the moon, could have gotten weaker. Their confidence, even their vitality, could have gotten weaker because of the Ketu conjunction to the sun. So not great when you think about it. And on top of which, you have Saturn in the 8th house again. Saturn, I'm sorry, because again, having in view what I said about her Saturn already falling into his 8th house natally, was triggering some kind of, problems with joint assets after marriage. And now Saturn in the 8th house of the composite chart would further exaggerate those problems, so definitely would explain the bitter custody battles and alimony battles and court whatever. I don't even know if they're not. I think there might still be battling the whole situation. Like, I don't know, something about how the finances were split and who got which property after divorce and all that stuff. So, wow, yeah, that would make sense. And on top of that, look at this. You have Saturn opposite Venus in the 2nd house, and the ruler, which is actually the ruler of the 2nd house. So, so you have like literally the savings, right? Because this is the chart of the relationship, right? So basically, the 2nd house of the composite shows the fixed assets that you gain, that you save as a result of this relationship, right? So things like properties, like money, any kind of fixed assets, and they had disputes over these things, right? Because it's opposite Saturn, so it's shown here. Very, very interesting, but also slightly depressing, isn't it? And however, like I said, probably the best actually aspect that they have in composite is the fact that they have Jupiter and conjunct Mercury in the 7th house, because Jupiter is the ruler of the 7th house, falling in the 7th house, and conjunct the Lord of the 1st house, falling in the 7th house. So definitely this would have added to the durability of this relationship and the strong sense of purpose and unity between the two of them. And another thing is, what is great is that having planets in Pisces, so for her, this means that she has her moon, her Jupiter, her Mars conjunct the Jupiter-Mercury composite. So when you have conjunctions between the person's natal planets and the composite chart planets, this shows that the person in question is going to feel particularly affected by the relationship, particularly attached to the relationship. And especially since you have Jupiter here, which again is a signifier of children, right? So maybe she already felt instinctively, this could have added to why she felt maybe from the beginning that this was the person she wanted to have kids with, because it's the composite Jupiter and it also aspects her moon, Mars, Jupiter conjunction natally. And on top of that, oh, actually, no, not on top of that. This is interesting here. Let me check. Yes, well, actually, this is also true for him, right? So he also, but for him, it's only the Jupiter. So he has Jupiter in Pisces conjunct composite Jupiter and Mercury. So just by looking at these situations here, she's the one who was the more involved in the relationship, because she's the one who she has her moon conjunct the composite Jupiter and Mercury. So that's a lot of emotional involvement and attachment. And another thing that is, another thing is that his other planets, like his personal planets, are not conjunct the composite planets, right? He has a lot of planets in Sagittarius. Those are not represented in the composite chart. So basically he only has his Jupiter conjunct the composite Jupiter and Mercury, which, you know, these planets are not being the most personal planets, the emotional planets. See, if he would have had, let's say, Venus, or if he would have had the moon strongly aspected by composite planets, I would have said, okay, he was super emotionally affected by this relationship. But looking at this, unfortunately not. I would say that she was the one who was more emotionally involved in the relationship and also more emotionally attached to him, because the magnetic attraction aspect was happening from her moon to his moon, stronger, much stronger, right? So basically the much stronger pull was from her to him rather than the other way around, at least on an emotional plane. All right, so this is pretty much what I can say with respect to their composite / chart interaspects analysis. And like I said, at some point in the future, hopefully maybe within a few weeks, I will also do the analysis between Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston, if you are curious to hear that. And yeah, but so far, this is it. This is what I managed to do. So once again, if you have liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel and click on the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. And also comment in the comment section with any feedback or any questions you might have. And also potential suggestions for future topics. Of course, feel free to share. And also, if you're interested in a private consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. Check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. And also, last but not least, check out the memberships. I will leave a link in the video description where you can see a detailed presentation of what my memberships entail, and if you're interested in them. And then also, last but not least, I have a tarot channel, and I will be linking it in the video description. If you want to check it out, maybe subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you at my next video.